Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving right into the absolute high-stakes, highly lucrative game of Kenyan government procurement. If you're an entrepreneur or a business leader in Kenya, you've probably heard the rumors about the sheer wealth generated through public tenders. But hey, you've also likely heard the horror stories, right? The complex systems, the endless paperwork, the brutal technical disqualifications. Well, today, let's separate fact from fiction. We're going to walk through a clear playbook to master the Electronic Government Procurement System, or eGP, and show you exactly how to turn these contracts into a rock-solid, sustainable revenue pillar. Listen, before we jump into the numbers, I've got a quick message for those of you who just want to bypass this massive learning curve altogether. We handle everything: eGP registration, KRA and BRS validation, AGP support, tender preparation, bid bonds, electronic submission, compliance audits, and even dispute resolution. From registration to contract payment, we are your end-to-end eGP compliance partner. Don't lose government business because of system complexity. Call 0726-924-245 today, and let's secure your next tender the right way. All right, for those of you ready to master the mechanics yourselves, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the trillion-shilling opportunity, tender intelligence and crafting bids, navigating eGP submission, post-award management, and finally, scaling and staying compliant. Let's get right into it. Section 1, the trillion-shilling opportunity. The sheer scale of this opportunity is, well, it's honestly staggering. We're talking about a public procurement market in Kenya worth 3.87 trillion shillings every single year. To put that into perspective, that is almost 30%, 28.7% to be exact, of the entire national GDP. So we're not talking about some tiny niche market here. This is the largest buyer in the country, hands down. But, a number that big, it can be pretty intimidating. How do you actually get a slice of that pie? Well, the government doesn't just hand out $3.87 trillion at random. There are very specific, targeted allocations. Look at that 30% chunk right there. That is 1.16 trillion shillings reserved strictly under AGPO, specifically for women, youth, and persons with disabilities. Then you've got another 40% that requires mandatory local sourcing for foreign contractors. The big takeaway here: AGPO is not some kind of charity. It is brilliantly legislated market segmentation. If you qualify, you absolutely need to be taking advantage of it. Now, despite this massive opportunity, win rates are still incredibly low, mostly because of systemic barriers. Believe it or not, 80% of AGPro eligible businesses don't even have their certification. And nationwide, only about 2,000 suppliers have actually registered on the mandatory EG platform. So getting registered early is literally a competitive moat. Take specialized medical, for example, fewer than 50 registrants. That's a temporary monopoly just sitting there waiting for you. ICT infrastructure, only about 200 players. But if you're stuck in general supplies with over 1,000 other registrants, well, you're basically just playing a high-volume, low-margin game. Moving on to Section 2, Tender Intelligence and Crafting Bids. Here's the truth. You cannot just bid on everything. You need strict opportunity filters. First up, value alignment. You want to target tenders that are 50 to 150% of your largest completed contract. Please don't jump from a 1 million shilling job to a 100 million shilling bid. You're going to get disqualified on capacity immediately. Next is capability match. Only bid if you can nail at least 80% on their technical evaluation criteria. Then lean into geographic advantages to save yourself a ton on logistics. And finally, temporal patterns. This is huge. Procuring entities absolutely rush to spend their budgets in June and December. That is exactly when you need to strike. So the crucial thing to understand here is the 80-20 rule of technical evaluation. In most tenders, the technical score carries a massive 70% weight, while the financial score is just 30%. You have to maximize that technical score before the evaluators even glance at your pricing. Seriously, if you fail the technical side, it literally doesn't matter if you have the lowest responsive evaluated bid. You're already out of the game. So how do you actually guarantee that technical edge? Well, here is the cheat code. First, optimize your team's CVs with 3 to 5 very similar past project references. Second, you absolutely need exclusive commitment letters for your key personnel. This is wild, but if 2 companies bid using the exact same engineer's CV without an exclusivity clause, both can get disqualified. Next, make sure you hit that 75% Kenyan employment requirement for works and consulting. And finally, prove your capacity with rock-solid equipment ownership docs or formal lease agreements. Do not leave any room for doubt. All right, Section 3, Navigating eGP Submission. Listen, Technical system failures on the eGP portal, that is the new disqualification frontier. With the system becoming fully mandatory by July 1, 2025, you have to follow a strict pre-submission protocol. Rule number 1, the 48-hour rule. Finalize everything 2 days early, because the portal congestion right before the deadline is just brutal. Number 2, use strict version control so you don't accidentally upload a rough draft instead of the final. Third, ensure mandatory serialization and pagination. I'm not kidding, missing a single page number can get your entire bid thrown out. And always, always test your digital signature verification on a sample document first.
Which brings us to Section 4, Post-Award Management.
There's a quote that perfectly captures the reality of this business. Winning the contract is 30% of success. Delivery is 70%. If you win the bid but fail to deliver, you don't just lose money, you absolutely ruin your performance rating, and you risk getting banned from the system entirely. Flawless execution and cash flow optimization, that is what actually keeps your business alive. Getting paid on time requires incredible documentation discipline. Start using Gantt charts for milestone tracking. Now, here is a huge mistake I see suppliers make all the time: getting delivery notes signed by junior staff. Don't do it. Ensure that only authorized officers sign them. Also, your invoice line items have to match the contract exactly, word for word. And what if a payment exceeds 60 days? Escalate it to the PPRA. It's actually a mandatory reporting requirement. You really need to maintain an 80% or higher performance rating to protect your future bids. Finally, Section 5, Scaling and Staying Compliant. Let's map out how this actually builds over a 36-month growth trajectory. Think of months 1 through 6 as your foundation phase. You want to target lower value tenders, under 1 million shillings, just to establish a flawless track record. Then, months 7 to 18, you enter the expansion phase. This is where you target 5 to 20 million shilling contracts in specialized categories. And finally, by month 19 and beyond, you reach market leadership. We're talking 50 million plus, multi-year framework agreements. You're basically building a massive sustainable revenue pipeline. But listen, as you grow, compliance becomes your shield. You have to implement a strict compliance calendar. Weekly, you're reviewing new tenders and keeping an eye on who is winning. Monthly, check those license expiries and track your performance ratings. Quarterly, make sure all your tax and AGPO reporting is filed perfectly. And annually, process all your full registration renewals. I cannot stress this enough. One expired license can literally cost you a 50 million shilling contract. And here is the absolute worst-case scenario if you ignore that calendar: debarment. This is a severe penalty issued by the PPRA that bans a supplier for 3 or more years. What triggers it? False information, breach of contract, corrupt practices, or tax defaults. Maintaining an A-grade compliance score, meaning 90% or above, is completely non-negotiable. So, what exactly do you need to do right now? Here are your immediate action items. First, get your eGP registration completed before that June 30, 2025 mandatory deadline. Second, secure your AGPO certification if you're eligible. Remember that 30% reservation advantage we talked about. Third, submit 5 highly strategic, carefully filtered tenders in the next 90 days to start building that track record. And fourth, start your compliance calendar today. Which leaves us with this final thought: the barriers that eliminate 80% of potential competitors, the intense documentation, the tricky eGP technical requirements, they are actually your competitive moat if you're prepared. So will you let system complexity lock you out? Or will you use this playbook or reach out to an end-to-end eGP compliance partner to transform government contracts into your ultimate sustainable revenue pillar? That 3.87 trillion market is waiting for those who are ready. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.